A couple tips whenever you're looking for dirt in your backyard. Now, if you're looking at your backyard, it's like, hey, I don't want to dig up my grass. You know, I see a bald spot over there. Let me go dig up that dirt. I would say that's not a good idea, because if there's nothing growing there, if nature can't grow something there, what makes you think you can grow something in that dirt?
Hey guys, welcome back to thedirtytank.com, and today's video is all about dirty tanks. In this video, I'm going to put together 6 dirty tanks for you guys. I have 10 dirty tanks that I have inside my house, and they're all loaded with plants, and I wanted to do the same thing in my garage with my breeding setup, so stay tuned.
All right guys, for those of you who have been following along on setting up this breeding rack back here, I have 8 tanks set up so I can breed some fish, sell them online, and really just experience a lot of different fish. It's gonna be really fun. I already set up the whole system, so if you haven't seen that video, I'll link it below so you can see how I set up the air system, the lighting, all of that. But now we're gonna go ahead and scape each one for a breeding type setup, and I'm actually gonna do dirty tanks. Dirty tanks for all of these because they are gonna be slightly planted as well, because I do want to grow a lot more plants also. So I'm going to go ahead and show you how I do that now. It could be very minimal, but we're mainly going to talk about how I set up a dirty tank, so that if you've been thinking about it, setting up a dirty tank, you kind of get some inside knowledge on how I set mine up and the benefits and some of the pros and cons. So let's dive into it. Now the first thing you're going to need is a whole bucket of dirt, or enough dirt to do about an inch or so at the bottom of your tank. Since I'm doing about 8 tanks, I'm going to need a whole bucket, maybe even more than this. I got my dirt from my backyard. I have a garden area that I don't put any pesticides in. I don't put any fertilizer. So I know this is really good, rich dirt. So I know it's safe. So if you're gonna do dirt, you really have 2 options. You have organic potting soil that you can buy at a hardware store or a landscaping store, a Lowe's or Home Depot, something like that. That's gonna be safe because organic potting soil means there's no fertilizer and there's no pesticides. So it's safe to use for this kind of setup. So you can do that if you wish, or if you wanna go in your backyard, just make sure you're digging up somewhere that you know doesn't have some of those chemicals sprayed in it. So I have some safe dirt that I'm gonna put in here. A couple tips whenever you're looking for dirt in your backyard. Now, if you're looking at your backyard, it's like, hey, I don't wanna dig up my grass. You know, I see a bald spot over there. Let me go dig up that dirt. I would say that's not a good idea, because if there's nothing growing there, if nature can't grow something there, what makes you think you can grow something in that dirt? So there's something probably wrong with that dirt. It's compacted, not a whole lot of nutrients, a lot of rock, clay, something. So if you see a bare spot, you know, you may want to leave that one alone, and get something that's really rich, really dark, and you know that is going to be some good soil to use. Now, if you're into gardening, you know that if you take a shovel full of dirt and you see earthworms in there, you know that means that you have really nutrient-rich dirt, soil, which is really good. That's how you know your plants are going to grow really well in your garden. Now, the same is true for growing aquatic plants, right? You want really nutrient-rich dirt, and so as you're digging through your backyard, if you're going the backyard route, if you see a lot of earthworms in there, that's a good sign. Go ahead and take them out, but that is a good sign. It means your dirt is good and it's gonna get the job done. Now, if your dirt's like really dry and like hard and you can't even crumble it in your hand, that's probably not good dirt. It's probably depleted of its nutrients, and you want to get a different spot or dig a little bit deeper to get some good dirt that we have here. So now I'm gonna go ahead and put this in and kind of show you the process how I do a dirty tank. So the first thing that we're gonna do is add about an inch of dirt. That's probably a good inch of dirt. You want to level it all out. Now, some of these twigs and stuff you want to go ahead and throw out. You don't want those in your dirt, but it doesn't have to be perfect. Some people, they screen their dirt, and I think that's a little excessive. I don't think you have to do that. I have been doing that and have 10 dirty tanks and they're all fine. So that's not a necessity, but it's something you could do if you want. So I'm gonna go ahead and clean all that out. This may be a little bit more than what I needed. So I'm gonna take a couple handfuls out. Now, after I put in the dirt, so you want about an inch or 2 inches of dirt, after you do that, I like to add in something to give it a pH buffer that's natural, right? Because if you have any organics, whether it's dirt or plants or driftwood, it's gonna lower your pH over time. And so what I do to combat that is I like to add crushed coir crushed coral in with my dirt, just so the pH is more stable. It doesn't fluctuate as much. And so what I use for that is agranite, and I think it's from Carib Sea, but this is just crushed coral in a bag, and I like to add about a cup of that for like every 10 gallons essentially. So I'm gonna go ahead and put in a little bit of this, mix it in there, and then we're gonna cap it with sand. So I add about a cup, doesn't have to be perfect, so I'm just eyeballing it. Whoops. Add about a cup. That's probably good. Then I like to mix it in with the dirt, just so it's good. You're gonna get your hands dirty, that's okay. There we go, kind of slope it up, because I know this is gonna be the back. So mine's actually going in long way so I can fit in more tanks. So I'm actually sloping it up this way here. And then after that, we're gonna add some sand. Now I just have some regular old black sand here. All right, so now it is time to add just a little bit of sand. You're gonna want about an inch of sand on there. Now it isn't the end of the world if you don't completely cover it. And that's really it, guys. That's all you need to do to set up a dirty tank, right? So let's talk about some pros and cons, right? So after you have an inch of dirt, after you have your crushed coral in to help buffer pH, then you cap it with about an inch or two of sand. You can slope it if you want to. But after you do that, it's ready to go and you're good. Everything's fine, right? You add some water, you put your hardscape in there, then you start planting, and you're gonna see some really good growth. Now the pros and cons. The pros is that you're gonna see great growth. You are, because there's nutrient-rich substrate. It's gonna feed your plant. Now the cons to this are that there's a lot of nutrients in here. And so if you're not gonna plant heavy, then you're gonna have problems. There's gonna be diatoms, there's gonna be algae, there's gonna be ammonia spikes, all of that. And so you wanna plant heavy. Now what if you're thinking, well, Andrew, I can't just buy all the plants at once. I don't even know if they'll survive. And that's a good point. And if you're in that boat, you can do what I do, right? And so in this case, I'm not gonna plant it today or even this week, right? So I'm gonna add my hardscape, then I'm gonna fill it up with water. Now, how I'm gonna prevent algae breakouts and the things just going wrong because there's no plants in here, I'm gonna add a ton of floating plants. And so what'll happen is as nutrients is released into the water column, these floating plants are gonna absorb all that. And so if you're gonna do a planted tank, plant heavy, but if you're not planting heavy, add a lot of floating plants just to give yourself a buffer to make sure there isn't any algae issues, right? When I set up my first planted tank, I had all kinds of issues, and I slowly fine-tuned it to where now I have a buffer, a pH buffer, and now I have a buffer for excess nutrients, which is gonna be my floating plants that absolutely cover over all of my tanks. I have a ton of dwarf water lettuce, a ton of red root floater, and a good bit of duckweed that's gonna go in all these tanks, and that's gonna help balance everything out.
All right, now that you know how to set up a dirty tank and what to look out for in good quality dirt if you're getting dirt from your backyard, while I'm doing time lapse of setting up all the other tanks, I kind of want to talk about some common questions that I see about dirty tanks. And the first one is, what about compaction? You know, I heard compaction could be an issue, and which can lead to anaerobic areas, dead zones within your tank. And here's what I got to say about compaction. One, I think it's more likely if you have very fine sand or very fine dirt. And that's another reason why I do not believe in screening my dirt, right? All those clumps in there, some of those debris are going to help make sure it doesn't compact as easily. In addition to that, the crushed coral that helps buffer pH also is going to help prevent compaction. Now, you can never eliminate compaction. It's going to happen. It's not the end of the world if it does, but some of those steps are going to help make it not as significant. Another question that I see is, what about aqua soil? Is it better than aqua soil? And I don't know if it's better than aqua soil, but what I do know is that at $30 a bag, I would need at least 6 to 7 bags. And so I would spend around $200 if I wanted to do all these tanks filled with aqua soil instead of dirt like I did. And so I think it's significantly cheaper and you get really, really good results. Now, another question that I get is, what kind of plants should I put in a dirty tank? And I would say, 1, you're going to want your floating plants, but 2, you're going to want plants that are going to take advantage of that dirt. So you want plants that have a root system. So you can use plants like cryptocorin or dwarf hairgrass or microsword or bacopa or Amazon sword or pennywort, or really any of the stem plants that are going to be stuck into the substrate. Those are the plants that are going to use and take advantage of all the nutrients that's in there. Well, guys, that's going to wrap up today's video. Thanks for joining. I hope you learned a thing or two about dirty tanks, and stay tuned for more updates on this breeding system. Until next time, guys. See ya.